glenoid bone loss. It could be either because of fracture or attrition. This is what we are dealing with. It could be because of attrition, because of repeated shoulder instabilities. And there's a typical presentation of these patients. Usually if it's a first episode with the glenoid bone loss, these patients present to us with a high energy mechanism of injury. Typically they say the arm is in about 70 degrees of abduction and in about more than 30 degrees of extension during the initial dislocation. The instability is in these patients, they usually complain of instability in the mid-range of movement, unlike those soft tissue instabilizers or people with the soft tissue, purely a soft tissue defect who have an end-range instability. And the patients with the glenoid bone loss usually complain of night dislocations. They are very apprehensive, and their apprehensive tests are usually positive between 30 to 90 degrees of shoulder abduction with minimal external rotation, unlike the soft tissue lesions where patients are apprehensive or apprehension test is positive at end range. Now you see this gentleman, he is very, very unstable, and this is a primary bone defect in his instability, shoulder instability. He is unstable at minimal range of external rotation and mid-range of abduction. So these are the patients pre-operatively or pre-investigation wise, we need to suspect glenoid bone loss. And why this mid-range instability? Usually we see in the end range, at the end range of movement, the capsule is tight and that restrains the shoulder from dislocating. Whereas in people who have a huge amount of glenoid bone loss, that's a considerable amount of glenoid bone loss, the head comes out of the glenoid socket because the socket is shallow and the socket is not able to contain these the glenoid head even at the mid-range. How do we assess the glenoid bone loss? There's always a controversy. Do we go in for an MRI or a CT? It's now seen that the CT is a better tool to assess the glenoid bone loss, and it's got its own advantages over MRI, whereas the MRI is a better predictor for the soft tissue injuries. Of course, nevertheless, even an MRI could, well done MRI, and with the perfect fit circle method, one could also assess the glenoid bone loss if a CT scan is not available. But by large, a 3D CT scan with humeral head digital subtracted image facing an end-phase sagittal oblique view of the glenoid would be giving a perfect quantitative assessment of the glenoid bone loss. Now, how do we do that? Very common on a bedside, or any one of our orthopedic colleagues can themselves, we ourselves measure these glenoid bone defects by a best fit circle method, which circumscribes around the inferior glenoid margin. We make a perfect fit circle around the inferior glenoid margin, which fits perfectly in the inferior part of the glenoid. This circle is considered to be closed, as close as to the original shape of the glenoid. An extension of that, a linear measurement method, where one would have the contralateral shoulder also CT scanned. One would D would be the width of the intact glenoid, D would the defect width of the deficient glenoid. The size of the defect would be measured small d by large D into 100. That gives us the percentage of the glenoid defect. This is another way of measuring if maximum anteroposterior diameter of a normal shoulder would be A, and the maximum AP dimension of the affected shoulder would be B. A glenoid bone loss percentage would be A minus B by A into 100. This would give us fairly a rough idea or accurate measurement of the glenoid bone loss. Arthroscopically, one could use a graduated probe and measure the glenoid bone loss as well. Taking the center point of the glenoid and up to the peripheral rim posteriorly, one could assess, get an accurate measurement, as I would go on, and in the slides ahead, I would show how to do that. Hill-Sachs lesion. Hill-Sachs lesion is related to the end-range instability. To assess the risk of the instability due to Hill-Sachs lesion, one could either have a dynamic examination on arthroscopy, or one could follow a glenoid tracking. Now, why dynamic examination? Before a Bankart's repair, if one would assess glenoid engagement of the Hill-Sachs lesion, this would be a false predictor as compared to after the Bankart's repair. It's after the Bankart's repair, one would need to put the arm in abduction extra rotation position, put it in a dynamic position, and see if the hill sacs really engages or no. Of course, it's a risky thing to do, but this is how exactly we need to measure engagement of a hill sacs lesion, and we see that the true engaging hill sacs after a Bankart's repair, after a soft tissue Bankart's repair, is as low as 7 to 7.5% in most of the literatures. Hence, we are actually over predicting or over assessing the engagement of the hill sacs on the glenoid. Can we determine it preoperatively? Yes, of course, we can do it either by a CT evaluation or an arthroscopic evaluation before the procedure. Now, an on-track and off-track lesion. Glenoid track by large means the zone of contact between the glenoid and the humeral head as the arm is raised along the posterior end range of movement. This is exactly what a glenoid track is. How do you calculate a glenoid track? One could calculate the glenoid track by a preoperative assessment, either by a CT scan or an MRI, or an intraoperative measurement using an arthroscopic measurement tool. Now, on-track and off-track lesion, what does this actually mean? Now, a glenoid track is nothing else but 83% of the AP dimension of a normal shoulder. Assuming normal AP dimension of a normal glenoid, 83% of the AP dimension is the glenoid track. A hill sac index is nothing else but the distance from the medial margin of the rotator cuff to the medial margin of the hill sac lesion. That means it covers that bone bridge between the hill sac lesion and the rotator cuff footprint, and up to the medial margin of the hill sac lesion. Now, if the hill sac index is more than the glenoid track, one would say this lesion is the off-track lesion. If the hill sac index is less than the glenoid track, one would say that this is the on-track lesion. Let me just give a simple example. On an end-on view reconstruction of the glenoid, preferably both sides used, D as a normal, big D. If one is not having the facility to CT scan the normal side, one could use the affected side. If one imagines that D, one could calculate D, larger D, by a best fit circle method and determine the glenoid bone loss as small d. Calculate the width of the glenoid track by the following formula. Glenoid track is equal to 0.83 D minus small d. That means 83% of the affected glenoid is what is the glenoid track. Hill sacs interval, how do you measure it? Now look at the diagram. If HS is the maximum width of the hill sacs lesion and BB is the bony bridge, a hill sacs index would be nothing else but the HS plus BB. That would give the hill sacs index. Now, if the hill sacs index is greater than the glenoid track, then it's an off-track lesion or an engaging hill sac lesion. If the hill sacs index is less than the glenoid track, then hill sacs is an on-track lesion and a non-engaging one. Arthroscopic measurements, viewing from the anterior superior portal, one need to measure the distance between the bare spot of the bare spot to the posterior margin of the glenoid and double it to get the greater D. That is the diameter. Measure the bare spot to the anterior rim. That would give us a bone loss. That's a small d. Now calculate the glenoid track like how we calculated on a CT scan. 0.83 big D minus D would be our glenoid track. Likewise, a hill sac index could be easily measured if we need to have a probe which is well graduated. Usually 4 millimeters is the length of the tip of the probe. Standard probe I'm talking about. One would measure the hill sacs interval by the width of the defect plus the width of the bone ridge between the hill sacs and the rotator cuff attachment. Now, why is this important? Anterior instability and the treatment guidelines. Now, if the glenoid bone loss is less than 25%, and if one has an on-track lesion, one would go ahead and just do an arthroscopic Bankart's repair. If the glenoid bone loss is less than 25%, and if it's an off-track lesion, one could go ahead and do an arthroscopic Bankart's repair plus a remplissage. If the glenoid bone defect is more than 25%, and if it's off-track lesion, one would go ahead and do a Latarjet procedure. Whereas if the glenoid bone loss is more than 25%, and if it's an off-track lesion, one would definitely consider a Latarjet with a humeral side bone graft procedure. I would thank the organizing committee of the Wiroc and the IAS Governing Council for providing us this platform. Thank you.